Sins Past is largely considered to be one of the worst Spider-Man stories ever written. It's basically considered a staple in the fandom as to not what to do with these characters. Essentially, if you're unaware, and I don't know how you wouldn't be, Sins Past is basically a 2004 comic book written by J. Michael Straczynski and featured the story where it was revealed before Gwen's death she actually went on to have an affair with Norman Osborn, cheating on Peter. She's from the streets. Get her out of here. This would then go on to tie into the story in present day where Gwen and Norman's kids, Sarah and Gabe, would confront Peter about the death of their mother. This is when Peter discovers the revelation that they are actually Norman Osborn's children, and he wants to help them because they are the only thing he has left of Gwen. Yeah, a bit odd when you consider that Peter just found out that Gwen cheated on him. Both of their stories were left very open-ended at the time, as if Marvel wanted to continue their stories at some point in the future. However, since the excessive hate that this series got, their stories and their fates were left rather inconspicuous and open-ended and wouldn't actually be revisited until 20 years down the line in Nick Spencer's run. Which, by the way, it got retconned. Thank for that. But did you know that Sins Past was actually meant to be completely different? I know, right? I didn't know either. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Sins Past could have actually been a really, really good story. Let me tell you why. But before I dive into the history and the backstory of Sins Past, I want to urge you guys to subscribe if you like Spider-Man content. We're almost at 30,000 subscribers. I can almost smell it.
What are you waiting for?
Don't want to preface that Sins Past originally was all Straczynski's idea. The idea of Gwen having long-lost kids coming back into Peter's life was always meant to be the idea of the story. This was because likely he probably felt like it could be a good way for Peter to relive some kind of trauma that hit him hard during Gwen's death, and it could be a good way to progress the character of Peter Parker forward by introducing new elements to his life to see how he'd react to them. Ultimately, JMS knows what he's doing, and he's one of the best Spider-Man writers, if not the best Spider-Man writer to ever write an amazing Spider-Man comic book. Like, I think that's undisputed. Everyone loves JMS. But what I'm trying to get at here is that JMS had a plan. However, when the story all started to fall apart was when Norman Osborn was decided as the father of Gwen's kids. And you'd never guess who actually came up with that idea. Oh wait, it was Marvel Editorial. Who could have guessed that? So yeah, Joe Quesada and Marvel Editorial, who at this point were already renowned for interfering in big stories for the character, decided that it would be a good idea for Norman Osborn to be the father of Gwen's kids. Yeah. According to JMS himself, he said that Marvel thought it would make the fans go crazy. Not only is it weird, and not only is it creepy considering Gwen was only like 18 or 19 and Norman Osborn's like a 50-year-old guy, it was also so out of whack with what we were used to with Spider-Man comics. And also, not to mention, it completely and utterly destroyed Gwen Stacy's reputation as a character. Gwen Stacy was portrayed as this perfect innocent civilian that so happened to lead the life that got caught up in the crossfire between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, and that had a major impact on what it meant for Peter. Peter Parker's lesson from Gwen Stacy's death was that he now knew that no one was safe. Those close to him will always suffer while he's Spider-Man. However, Sins Past transformed this idea from one of pure chance to undeniable intent. The Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy, so she didn't go public with their affair. At first, the Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy because he was trying to get back at Peter Parker, which made so much sense. But it then transformed into this really sinister, oh, Norman doesn't want Gwen to go public with their affair kind of story. And that completely destroys the whole purpose of Gwen Stacy's death and what it meant for Peter Parker going forward. While this is a dramatic piece of storytelling that would normally be perceived as a positive twist in the context of the Spider-Man comics, this was one that completely undid any sense of Gwen's persona that we had become used to. Once again, this was an incompetent attempt by Marvel to interfere in a story that clearly was never set up to go in that direction. And that's because JMS originally intended for the original father of Gwen's kids in this story to in fact be Peter Parker himself. And this is the reason as to why Sins Past could have actually been really, really good. Now, some people will say that if Peter was the father, it still would have been a really, really bad idea. But just give it a chance, just hear me out. You see, if Peter is the father, it actually completely eliminates all the major problems that fans have with this story. Let's look at the problems that the fans have with this story. It's Norman Osborn being the father to Gwen's children, and it's the damage that it does to the death of Gwen Stacy and Gwen's character in general. None of those problems exist anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is without its faults, because Peter and Gwen having kids is still a very out of whack and kind of weird story for an amazing Spider-Man comic. However, it is 10 times better better than what we actually got, and would have actually been a pretty interesting story nonetheless. Plus, if you actually go back and take away everything that fans kind of have a problem with, Sins Past is actually a really good book. It's just the narrative itself that is so demeaning to the character of Gwen Stacy, so people don't really vibe with it. It would be cool to see how Peter's past coming back to bite him could affect his relationships and life in the present day in the form of his own children. Obviously, they'd still have to be aged up, and I imagine JMS's original idea was to have the spider powers be a factor in their increased aging stimulus instead of the goblin serum, but either way, it would have been interesting to see the story of how they came back and where the story would have led in the present day. So why didn't we actually get this version of Sins Past? Why was it changed so that Norman Osborn was meant to be the father? Well, it's as simple as JMS was told no. He even admitted a few years back, and I quote, "There were no prior drafts with Peter as the father because the meeting with Marvel said not to do that as it aged up Peter." The prospect of Peter having kids has always frightened Marvel to their core, and once again, this is another example of Marvel not wanting Peter to move too far away from that status quo. And where have we heard that before? Oh wait, every other Spider-Man comic ever made. Marvel is so scared of changing the status quo with any of their characters that it basically just completely defeats the idea of having any future stories to begin with. It's also crazy when you look at it like this. Marvel are so scared of changing Peter Parker's character that they are willing to sacrifice the quality and integrity of some of their other characters like Gwen Stacy, who is a legendary Marvel character. And I think that is absolutely absurd. Do you know how damaging that could have been to Gwen Stacy's reputation if it wasn't for other stories that came before? If Gwen Stacy wasn't such a likable and loved character beforehand, and the story meant so much for the character of Spider-Man, Sins Past would have completely destroyed the character. And we're lucky that it didn't. We also have to thank the TASM movies for also kind of doing it justice as well. But there you have it. If JMS got what he wanted, Sins Past would have actually been okay. Thanks for watching. Like I said at the start of the video, make sure you subscribe because we're so close to 30,000 subscribers. I know we can reach it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time. Peace.